Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in to talk about My Hero Academia chapter 363. This is my Simp Academia, where I will try to be positive about Hero Academia. Before we get into the video proper, just need to cover a few things, and the bird's going a little bit crazy over there, so just don't mind it. It's having a good day. First, one of the commenters just mentioned I was too negative last time. And that always gets me, because I have so much fun. I have so much fun criticizing. It's just a fun thing to do. It's my stress relief. Anyway, I'll try and tone down negativity, or not the negativity, the criticalness. Not really a big deal, but I'll tone it down. And then I missed something in the previous chapter where we saw Shigaraki's dad, his head popping out when Shigaraki was freaking out. I liked that the head popped out, because to me, I have an idea that maybe Shigaraki will switch bodies, quite literally. He will make a clone body, he will switch his consciousness there when someone lands a critical hit, or maybe we get things like Tenko coming out of the body because Shigaraki generated flesh and Tenko's able to escape the body. So just seeing Kotaro's face there was good. Now, the fact that the face appeared, I think that might have just been the sign that Shigaraki can produce other people's bodies, but I don't think necessarily that would have been Shigaraki's dad had he come out. I think the face came out because that guy's associated with trauma for Shigaraki, so I think just in that panic, that's what ends up happening there. The face is going to be interesting, but right now I'm seeing it as something indicative of stress in Shigaraki. That's what I think is going to happen. I really don't think you're going to see a revival of that character or any other people. We know that Shigaraki, when he hallucinates and whenever he's going on his little soul journeys, we've seen his family there before, but there's no reason to believe those are their vestiges. There's no reason to believe that those are their ghosts. I just think that they're constructs that Shigaraki has made himself. Anyway, Chapter 363. I'll be pretty good today. I'll be pretty chill. I'll be very, I will sing the praises of the chapter, because this is actually a really good chapter. Anyway, for 363, there's a lot of stuff to really cover here, because this is, again, I would say this is a turning point. This is a phase. We're moving phases. And when we're moving phases, there's a lot of things that can be talked about. I'm just trying to think about where to start. We'll start with what I think is really good. I am so happy to see Dabi coming back in there. I don't know how often I talked about it on these videos, but the people on live stream know that one of my ideas for Dabi was that we were going to get second wind Dabi. Been calling it second wind Dabi for a very long time. We were going to get second wind Dabi, and maybe when we went back to him, we would be seeing him burning someone alive, and then we'd be going back into that whole situation there. So overall, when you look at this chapter, very happy to see Dabi coming in there, burning someone alive. That's pretty much textbook of how you would have done a second wind. And we talked about it last time, but the author signaled that we could be going into villain advantage when he had All For One, or Shigaraki All For One, say that this is the villain's turns now or whatever. So he set himself up for a pretty textbook transition, and then we go into this chapter and we're seeing villain advantage. I'm just going to call it villain advantage just to point to the phase where the villains look like they got, that they got a lot of oomph behind them. Anyway, the stuff with Dabi, ultimately very happy about that. That pretty much went down the way I expected it to. Now, when it comes to Dabi, I'm just expecting general things like Ida's going to have a moment where he saves Shoto. Ida's going to get more stuff there. In this chapter, we also see the Todoroki family. I'm very excited about that, because if this one, I know I talked about it in the videos, but without the Todoroki family showing up in the Shoto fight, that didn't feel complete to me. I've made this point many times before. The Dabi stuff isn't done until you have the Todoroki family having some kind of input in it. Because otherwise, it would have been very bad where the author had left it, because he made so much build-up around the Todoroki family sticking together and dealing with Dabi together. Now, mind you, there's some question marks that pop up here, because there's some stuff in the chapter where the Todoroki family appears where it looks like they might be forced into this conflict in a really aggressive way by Skeptic. We'll talk about that more when we get there. But right now, the Dabi stuff, it can't be finished without the Todoroki family having juxtapositions talking about them. Now, in my heart of heart, I would love if Natsu gets a opportunity to talk to Dabi. I think that would be very good. I think it would be a neat little thing. Thing is, to get the Todoroki family in front of Dabi, you need to do so much. So many panels would have to be spent on getting Dabi and Natsu in the same room that it would be kind of tough to do that, and we'll talk more about that in a quick second. But overall, the stuff with Dabi, I'm very happy about it. It went down how I thought it would, which made me feel like a little bit less dumb than I usually am. So ultimately, good stuff on the Dabi thing. In terms of where I think that's going to go in the future, I really think Dabi would be best utilized coming into conflict with Endeavor. If we get the Endeavor versus Dabi fight, that's where we'll see the majority of the Todoroki family drama and the rhetoric being expressed. We'll have to see how Dabi wants to bring in the rest of his family, if they're going to be forced to watch as he kills Endeavor or something like that. Again, though, getting the family in front of Dabi is going to require so many pages that it's going to increase how many chapters we spend in the final arc. But Dabi, the author really likes writing Dabi, so you know, what can you really do there? Anyway, let's talk about the phases and what we're seeing here, because this is going to be really important. So what's cool about this is we can actually see a lot of the author's strategies, and the reason we can see a lot of the strategies is because this whole thing is such a logistical nightmare that the position that he has put himself in is not a good one. You don't really want to be in the position that the author is in. And just to illustrate what exactly he's doing, the problem here is he doesn't simply have responsibilities to the story, he has the responsibilities to the world surrounding the story. And when I say the world surrounding story, I mean our world. As he's going into this, he has set up commitments for many of his characters within the story. Kirishima, Seiro's been committed to, Hawks might still be committed to, Toga and Ochako have been committed to, Kuineta has been committed to, whoever's going to be dealing with Ghastly has been committed to, I said, Shoji has been committed to. Too many characters have had flags raised saying, hey, these characters are going to get something. And you know what? But it's by his own admission. Some of those characters, he's already decided that we're going to get stuff since we were back during the Class 1A versus Izuku era. So he has many responsibilities to the characters that he himself has created for himself that he has to meet. That's the story side. But then on the real world side, the problem here is, how much time is he going to spend away from Izuku? How is he going to slot those characters in and make sure that the manga maintains momentum and that he doesn't slow down at any given point? How does he make sure that he doesn't make it too depressing? Because we know from one of the volume extras, he apologized to the younger fans for making something so depressing. So that one by itself suggests we can't be in villain advantage for too long. We have to kind of go back up to hero advantage or hero getting something going on. Point is, in terms of the logistical issues he's running into, he has to be able to balance whatever is going on and keep the manga interesting. He has to make sure that, because Izuku's the main character of the manga, that however long Izuku is kept away from the main action, it doesn't annoy the fan base too much, or it doesn't make the fan base too sad. And you know, with the Shonen Jump metrics, he just has to make sure that the series maintains its momentum within Shonen Jump, which can be very hard if you're focusing on just the lower rung characters. So, clearing that, we understand he has responsibility to the story, he has responsibilities to the world around the story, he has to keep his series being successful. What has he done so far? What do we see here? Well, we can look at it again as phases, because there is something that was created here, there is a pattern, there is a method within here. And again, the great thing about this is that because he's in such a bad situation in terms of how many things he has to get done, he does need a strategy, and that strategy tells us a lot about his mindset on this kind of stuff. So, when it comes to the phase that we just saw here, I really thought that when we first got that page where Dabi was pretty much giving us a framework, that we would be diving into the fights for like Toga and Spinner. I really thought we were going to be doing that kind of stuff. We got to see the other battlefields. It really seemed like we were just going to do a general overview of maybe one chapter per fight. That would have been pretty cool. But as we went past the Dabi fight, what we ended up seeing was that the author doubled down on All For One. Like, All For One having as much as he did during this phase was really a gigantic surprise for me. And then after that, we went to Shigaraki, which was another big surprise for me. Like, yes, he did show us a little bit of the battlefield. He showed a spinner, but those three having the power there was kind of crazy. So I think what you could call this past phase that we just exited, you could pretty much call it the Dabi All for One Power Hour. And what's really interesting here is that Dabi, All for One, Shigaraki, those are pretty much his best villains in the series. Like, I personally believe those three characters are in the top 5 villains. And let me tell you, I don't think Toga or Spinner are in that category. But those are his heavy hitters. Those are the characters that he can really get into. And what he ultimately does there is that what's ultimately interesting about that is that he's using the three of them, and he's using them for what is essentially a phase that the other characters don't get. If you look at it, what we just cleared had a bookend in it. You started with Dabi, and then here you kind of have an answer to the Dabi situation. You have Dabi's second wind. So it's really interesting because like this phase just ends up being like a preliminary phase or like a prologue to Villain Advantage. So what I think is going to happen now, I think those guys were the prologue to set up the rest of the villain fight. And I think that the reason that pretty much Dabi, Shigaraki, and All for One can get an extra phase compared to Toga and Spinner. And when I say an extra phase, I mean like an extra like what 4 chapters each for them to like really do stuff, is because the author just has more stuff for them to do. And when you think about it in terms of responsibility, you know, you have Dabi, and Dabi has a responsibility to Shoto. Like, you have to give a Dabi-Shoto fight just to show where Shoto's at. Thing is, though, Shoto's not a really good rhetorical opponent for Dabi. And now you can see, well, now Dabi has a second phase that he can go to, that being Endeavor, if he gets there. Anyway, those guys serve as the prologue to the Villain Advantage phase. Now, in Villain Advantage, and again, that's just what I'm calling the phase. The phase will just be marked by the villains making a lot of strides. I think in Villain Advantage, we're going to see stuff like... oh, I forgot one character, Shinzo. Shinzo also hasn't been brought up, and Shinzo's going to be probably critical. But we'll talk about that in a few moments. Anyway, in Villain Advantage, we'll see maybe more terror on the UA side. Maybe Aizawa will be in a very dangerous position, and then Class 2A has to come in and help him out. Maybe we'll see Spinner making steps towards Central Hospital, and we'll actually see the Shoji fight happen there. Villain Advantage should be relatively simple. It's just the villains have the advantage. I do think, though, that the next phase after Villain Advantage is going to be hero comeback, pretty much. It's where the heroes start making moves that counter whatever the villains did during Advantage. Now, mind you, I do think some of the villains' battlefields are going to end on a bittersweet note. I do think some of the villain battlefields, you're going to see some of the villains accomplishing their goals. But that wouldn't be so bad. That makes things more interesting. Anyway, for Hero Comeback, I'm imagining that if we're going into Hero Comeback, we're going to be seeing stuff like Sero's big move. We might see like Hawks' big move of hope, or like Hawks becoming a shining hope or whatever. We might see the end of Toga versus Ochako. I would say Shoji could probably have his moment during Hero Comeback. If Bakugo is going to be alive, I do think we could probably see Bakugo's revival during Hero Comeback. A Hero Comeback might also be when we see Plan B from All Might. Point is, at Hero Comeback, we're going to be seeing across the board a lot of things suddenly going the hero's way. One of the more interesting things here is that we have Skeptic making a lot of big moves here. He's interesting in that he's one of the new elements introduced in the chapter that we haven't heard of before for the war. But yeah, no, when it comes to Skeptic, I feel like he could be countered by Labrava. And to answer your questions, for anyone wondering why would Labrava counter him, it's because Labrava is the only other person who actually has known hacking skills within Hero Academia. In terms of the conservation of narrative detail, Labrava is the only person that's really set up to actually counter Skeptic, and she legitimately could, given that she's able to hack. If we assume that the video sharing sites have the same level of security as like modern video sharing sites, then we should assume that Labrava has reputable skill. Anyway, yeah, hero counter, we'll probably see like a lot of things coming up. I think Bakugo would be the biggest triumph of hero counter. If you bring back Bakugo at that moment, that would be a pretty good move, and it would really signal that things are going well for the heroes at that point. Mind you, after hero counter, I still think we go into some depressing. We still have the villains getting some victories in there, and then we probably retreat. Maybe villain regroup happens because Kurogiri gets out. You know, honestly, the author has a lot of opportunity here. But right now, what I would say we're going to be seeing is villain advantage, maybe 5 chapters of villain advantage because the author doesn't want to stay too long and make it too depressing. And then maybe go into hero counter. Heck, if we go into hero counter like in this very chapter, or like in chapter 364 or 365, that'd be surprising, but the author also does want to move relatively quickly here. Anyway, that was like my big analysis on the structure and the phases here. For now, I am locking in on, we're seeing portions of just the villains dominating, and then we'll see the hero counter attacks, because we know a lot of characters are getting good moments here. Anyway, let's do the page-by-page walkthrough. I'm also kind of out of breath, but there's still a lot of detail to cover. Page 1. So one of the most important things for page 1 is that joint training is being called upon. People, you know, like the casual audience doesn't really like joint training, but joint training is super important because it sets up a lot of different things. You can see how the author is making use of joint training here. And really good on the author to like remind us of Bakugo's best moment, that being joint training. Now, when you see Monoma having his moment there, we've answered one of Monama's rhetorics, that being Monoma as the guy in the background, or like the aesthetics of a hero. We haven't answered anything about Class 1A versus 1B, which is a very important part of his character. So I do think that Monoma, if Bakugo comes back, and that's a really big if, I think Monoma is going to be yelling it out. I think he's going to have a really big moment. I think he's going to have a little bit of a monologue talking about like, yeah, you know what, Class 1A is pretty alright, but Class 1B is pretty worthwhile as well. He's going to have some kind of big thing. He's going to acknowledge that to some degree, Class 1A is dazzling, or something like that. Point is, right now, Monoma is probably going to be tied into Bakugo revival if it happens. And I gotta say, I keep saying if, because what throws off the Bakugo stuff is that Bakugo could come back as a vestige. This was a good intro here. What the author has pretty much done is that if he has Monoma say anything later on, this is like kind of the introduction to those later dialogues he could have. Page 2 and 3. Okay, so page 2, not really important. It's just an establishment page just to show us where we kind of are. I do see that Bakugo has both pupils again. But yeah, page 2 doesn't really tell us too much. Page 3 is a really good page. I really personally enjoyed it. Lots of little details. We find out that there's no pulse. We find out his heart is ravaged. Good. I like knowing that because that makes it kind of feel like, okay, Bakugo might stay dead. We have Mirio realizing he's lame. Good. He needs to realize that. Oh, speaking of Mirio, this was another mistake I made. People like told me about Mirio's fist, and that Shigaraki could have winced because Nejire's power was there. Yeah, you know, I gotta tell you, my bias completely blinded me to that. Like, I did see the little distortion around his arm, but in my mind I was thinking like, why would extra acceleration do anything? At the end of the day, like, Mirio was still hitting him with flesh and blood arm with some hair covering it, because that's what Mirio's outfit is made of. Like, I don't care, you can like make Mirio go faster, but it's not gonna do anything. And like, what makes that whole thing even more tricky is that the author admits that it doesn't do anything, because Shigaraki responded so quickly. He scratched Mirio before Mirio was going to go intangible. So like, you know, it's really interesting. Thank you for everyone that pointed it out, but my bias was still, and it still kind of is, like, acceleration shouldn't do anything. And the reason I say acceleration is because like in that previous panel, you can see that there's no Nejire energy covering his actual fist. It's only covering his forearm. And it also like brings up questions of like, how much acceleration can that thing actually add to his arm? And like, what does it mean that it's like latching onto his arm and pulling him forward? That's kind of weird. Anyway, yeah, no, worth pointing out, like, but thanks for everyone for pointing it out. Anyway, moving back into page 3. We have some good all for one gloating. Now, they talk about Aizawa taking a back seat. Thing is, like, Aizawa technically always takes a back seat. Like, I get it, like, he was closer to Shigaraki, but Aizawa was running away. Like, people were helping him run away from the enemy when Shigaraki was, like, coming after him. So, it's not like he hasn't taken a back seat before, and he's still active here. It's just that Shigaraki's really overpowered. Anyway, there's some good shots here. We see Sun Eater going in. We see Mirio going in. We see Nejire has just fully given up, which kind of unfortunate. Like Nejire, like, you know, instead of pounding the ground, can you like try and hit him? Because like Sun Eater's just gonna go in there, but you know, whatever, it doesn't matter. One of the most critical things that we see, or two critical things, we can still see some of Kotaro's head here, and we see an eyeball opened up. We saw an eyeball open up in the previous chapter. Seeing Best Jeanist here, he's sending in a lot of his threads. Those, like, he's lost up to his elbow of thread, right? So he's sending a lot into Bakugo right now. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not that helps. We haven't seen Edge Shot, though. Edge Shot might already be inside of Bakugo's body. Alright, we're going into page 4, page 5. We have a pretty good page for Mirko. I really hope she doesn't die because this was a really good page. Good dialogue on Shigaraki, good dialogue on Mirko. Again, she looks amazing. We have All For One giving Mirko a pretty big rundown. I think some things are interesting here. Like he says they didn't come with enough people or plans. See, the thing is, you can't really believe that because we haven't seen Shinzo. Shinzo, remember, was so significant that during the Aoyama stuff, he got a whole page dedicated to him hanging upside down. Alright? One doesn't do that because they're not going to use the character. So like when you're seeing him talk here, you got to remember, like, no, there's a lot of people that have been promised to be getting stuff and we have yet to see them. Those people could still be coming in. We also know Plan B, so they do have contingencies. Plan B is probably in case everything goes wrong here. But yeah, the thing here with Mirko, I think her survival will be the one that indicates how quickly we go into a hero counter. Because, like, she is within death's grasp right now. So she really shouldn't be there for too long. Someone really should come and do something about this. We'll have to see how exactly Horikoshi saves Mirko, if she's going to be saved. Okay, on page 6 and 7. So page 5 gives us a transition where we see those clouds. And now I think we have the answer. Because on page 6 we have the rumbling going on. And we know that there was an uptick in the temperature before the rain or like the clouds started, right? So I would say that maybe Dabi's the reason why the clouds are forming. I mean, and mind you, that means that he's having an effect over a large region of Japan. Like at least 3 of their... What are they called? It's not parishes. Prefectures? Oh, carousels, yeah. Alright. He has a large range, which, if this is him, it's really interesting. But, like, given the way that the author framed it, it must be him. He's evaporating all that ice, so, like, all that water vapor is going into the sky and forming clouds. I can believe that. Anyway, really good page for Dabi coming back. My big question is, like, how exactly is he mimicking it? Is he just using like a full fire variant? Because like he doesn't have cold blood to circulate the way that Shoto does. Is that X on his chest just hot? I mean, I think it should be. Anyway, good stuff here. We're probably going to see pretty good stuff. Now we do know that Dabi has like ice resistance. I want to understand what exactly are the differences between him and Shoto's technique, because I think like Dabi probably adapted the general concept but like made it completely his own. Anyway, on page 8 you have the full-on Shoto review of what Dabi was doing, pretty much just hammering down on the fact that Dabi's pretty much a genius at using his quirk. Mind you, self-destructive, still a genius. On these pages, well, let's finish page 8. We find out about Endeavor and we get the confirmation that Skeptic is keeping track of everyone. This was pretty obvious, I think. We also see that Satellite has the FGI thing on it. I always forget what the name of his company is, but we've seen that acronym before. Like the guy over at the Mina Kirishima battlefield has one as well. So yeah, they're in communication. This is probably like the most believable thing. There shouldn't be any question marks here because this is all consistent with established lore. On the bottom of page 8, we had All For One pointing out that Izuku knew that you can't give villains time to prepare. Thing is, everyone knows you can't give villains time to prepare. And I like how he says he was correct to rush the timetables on all this, even if his efforts would have still been in vain. Nah, no. Like, this is just All For One gloating. Like, no, we know that this was not a good idea because Izuku didn't know what he was doing. Like, no. Rushing the timetable isn't actually worthwhile if you don't know what you're rushing for. So Yeah, like this is just there was literally no winning this because the heroes were not good enough to find a man hiding in a cave. There was no winning this. Like their best shot was going to be prepare and just wait for the villains to arrive because they just couldn't take control of the situation. And at that point, you don't want Izuku to be burning out here. Like, it was a really tough situation on the hero side for this one. Like, All For One's just way too good at hiding in holes. Anyway, page 9 is a giant justification for what Skeptic is doing. Pretty much him just telling us, like, yeah, he stayed behind and he still has control of all his company's resources because, well, he's like the big boss. He's also gone a little bit crazy. Now, Skeptic's dialogue is kind of important because, like, Shigaraki doesn't care about Skeptic. This is pretty obvious from the moment that Shigaraki called Higanto Makia, and Makia only brought the main members of the villain league. The one that brought Skeptic along was Dabi, because Dabi actually knows how to use people. Now, here, what you have is... Here, what the author does really good is that you have Skeptic saying, I'm going to promote Shigaraki's interest, but I will also see Redestro's ideals realized. We then go into like a reiteration of people will wield their meta abilities as equals. No other factor will determine who gets ahead in this world. Which, it's really interesting how stupid these people can be. Because like, in any place where there is a discrepancy in power, the people with power will almost always rise up, unless you're talking about absolute saints, which we know these people aren't. And, you know, this is... You go into page 10, and he says, all will know true freedom and anarchy marked by the absence of so-called heroes and villains. And, you know, Horikoshi's an amazing guy, amazing writer, beautiful writer. Wow. I love how this is perfectly consistent with the idea that All For One will oppress everyone equally. I love how in a world of freedom and anarchy, the Demon King rules over it all. So consistent, so beautiful. Really amazing stuff, Horikoshi, because you know what you're doing. You're pretty much painting, like, that Skeptic is fully out of the loop on the whole situation. Yeah, no, man, like, yeah. This has always been a problem with Redestro's people. It's because Shigaraki doesn't care about them. Also, if you bring in Shigaraki, I'm going to destroy everything. Things get even more complicated. But yeah, no, Skeptic, like, this is just really muddy. Skeptic's being painted as trying to do his own little thing here, but it's just, like, there's too many things going on, really muddy. Anyway, page 10, we have someone's trying to hack the system. You have Mandalay being shown again. The spoiler suggested that this is why Mandalay can't get in contact with Izuku or anything like that, that he hacked the communication. I will say that the dialogue right now is someone's trying to hack the system. So, like, he hasn't had full control yet. We also see that suggested that Skeptic is sending something into the shelter or something like that. Given that he's saying, namely, those who preach and cling to the teachings of the past generations, they are unnecessary in a new world to come, that makes it sound like he's about to target civilians, and we know that the Paranormal Liberation Front are terrorists. We know that they 100% would bomb many cities, because that was their original plan. They would bomb many cities to signal Shigaraki's arrival and to throw society into disarray. So them bombing a shelter is pretty consistent with what we've seen so far. That said, I do think that hero counter is going to be one of the main points stopping Skeptic. I don't think he's going to get very far. But right now, Skeptic's dialogue seems to imply that he's going to involve the civilians. Really got to hope that Labrava comes in there and does a save. Now, page 11. Page 11 is a very special page. You see the Todoroki family. They look as beautiful as always. And then you see the nice lady that we once saw when Bakugo and Shoto were doing the remedial exams. Heck, you even have the kids referring to them. 5 weenies on our side, Bakugo and company as well. Now, my question is, you're in a disaster situation. You're there on the day that you know that villain operations are going on. My question is, why is the teacher taking care of 5 kids at least? Like, where are the parents? This is D-Day. This is like the day that everything is decided. You don't have to go to work. You're in a shelter. What are you doing? Where are your parents? Why is it her? Why is she keeping track of these kids? Why isn't she doing her own little thing? And mind you, I get it. You know, like you could say, oh, she's just giving them like schooling because like they need to get their schooling done, right? It's the start of a new year. Actually, that's the other big thing. It's the start of a new year. What schooling is there to be done? Anyway, whatever. She gotta keep up their education, but it's like, yo, when there's a hurricane going on a Caribbean island, there's no school. No one expects a teacher to come in there and be watching the kids at a school or a shelter. Like, heck, actually, I've been in plenty of shelters during hurricanes. No one expects the teacher to still be teaching a school or watching someone's kids when the parents are quite literally, like, heck, less than, like, a yard away. Come on, what's going on here? Where are their parents? But like from a story perspective, this is just Horikoshi bringing back characters that we've seen before, and like they're brought in as a unit because like, oh, we saw them together before. It's just like, I think this is nonsensical. I question everything about this. This is just silly. It's silly. It's just he wants to up the stakes. Like, oh look, there's like people we've seen before, and they're like here. Yeah, I just love that this woman is like, yo, behave yourselves. What if a villain were to show up? Why are their parents not the ones saying this to them? And given that you're not really keeping track of all these kids, like, it doesn't really feel like... Anyway. It's just a funny situation. Like, there's 101 reasons you can use to justify it. It doesn't change that it's a really silly situation. On page 12, this might be like the title of the video, but on page 12 we see handsome All For One. Now, people were saying that All For One was super hot. And I'm like thinking like, we've known 90% of this guy's face. Did you really doubt he was going to be handsome? Like, seriously? Who doubted that? No, All For One was always going to be handsome. Like, you could see, again, 90% of his face. And people, when spoilers were coming out, commenter Kayla and another commenter that was looking at Twitter was going, like, they were telling me people were going crazy asking about freckles. And it's like, we've already seen enough of his face to know that there's not freckles. And mind you, like, this guy could still have freckles pop up. Like, maybe he might be super pale, and the moment that sun hits him, he might have freckles pop up, because that's how freckles do sometimes. They pop up in the sun. So we might see some freckles here still. Point is, though, really, really silly that people are surprised that he looks good. Because it's like, what did you think? There's very little you can do to make the 10% of a face look ugly, right? Anyway, the big question here is that we have All For One signaling a counter attack. Are we going to go to All For One in the next chapter? Or are we going to do something else? I don't know. Overall, I'm excited though. Whew. Also, I love that Hawks has to say All For One as if we don't know who's talking right now. So leaving this chapter, one of the things that I do find very interesting is that we still haven't had Shigaraki officially acknowledge that something's changed in All For One. And now with All For One being rewound and all that kind of stuff, what we really got to be looking at is like, is he going to be on a time limit? Is he going to kill himself? Is he going to like cheese it the way that Izuku did? Is the rewind substance going to end by itself and his gamble will have paid off like with no consequences? Is All For One going to be capable of more quirks? Lots of things are going to be revealed with this whole rewind shenanigan, and I can't wait to see it. Anyway, that's chapter 363 of My Hero Academia. Overall, very good chapter for me. I really enjoyed it. It's going to be interesting to see the phase that we go into next. I, again, do think we're going into villain advantage for a little bit. Now, the big question here, like, is again, how long does Horikoshi want to keep things relatively oppressive? We'll have to see. Where is the first counter from the heroes going to come from, as well, as another big question. Anyway, guys, let me know what you thought down below, and until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.